States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start with Superintendent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. A couple of quick things that I would like to just make some announcements on before I bring Mr. Witherow to begin what will be the start of our 2019-2020 budget process. Each year, in the middle of the year, have this presentation for us that gives us a 5-year snapshot of what our fiscal structure looks like. So it's happy to report and look forward to Pat telling us that our fiscal position is very, very strong, which then sets us up for how we'll spend time over the next few weeks developing our 1920 budget that will eventually go to taxpayers in May. Alongside of that, we're also working on a Vision 2020 project where we're looking at our 3 schools and some needs in those schools. And we've begun to communicate out to the public a request for people to come in and talk with us and take a look at some ideas that we have. So the presentation we're going to be walking through tonight really digs deep into the middle school here. Some of that presentation will be on the screen, and some of that presentation, for those of you that wish to join us, will be standing up, walking around the school. So before we get to that, just have a couple of quick announcements. First announcement, I know at the last couple of meetings there were some questions regarding Middle Hope. For some time now we've been working on finding a new tenant for the Middle Hope Elementary School, and we are happy to announce that we have a new tenant that will be occupying the Middle Hope Elementary School as long as we can finalize a contract and this Board of Education reviews and approves that contract beginning with the 1920 school year, and that will be Orange Ulster BOCES. They're planning to bring programming into the elementary school down at Middle Hope to offer special education programs to be determined. The benefit to that is our building will be occupied, which is always a good thing for a school. We will be collecting rent, and we will have children in those programs that will only have to drive to Middle Hope instead of having to go to Goshen or any other satellite program. So there's a win-win-win in that process, and we're anxious to get that moving forward, and finalizing it and presenting a lease to this group and nailing that down as a program for the 1920 school year. So there'll be a little more detail to come on that in the coming weeks. Also for the Board of Education, right now we have a scheduled board meeting, and I think we had a discussion on this, but never took action on it. So the scheduled board meeting for June 20th, June 21st, the next day of graduation. So June 20th is a horrible day for a board meeting. Now remember, we made a switch in when graduation is. By calendar, it's the 26th, Wednesday the 26th. But we were able to confidently, in a number of other districts also, move it back to Friday the 21st because it's a better place to have graduation for families. So I'm asking the board 2 options. Monday, June 17th, or Thursday, June 27th. So Monday the 17th would be the Monday of graduation week is an option. Or just push it off by a week to the 27th of June. I like Monday the 17th because wrapping up school's business prior to graduation is good for staff. But if the board's pleasure is the 27th of June, that's fine. We don't have to decide tonight, unless, of course, the board would like to do that during other items, but we do need to make a vote because our calendar is established by board votes. Also, for the Board of Education, we have an internal request for a policy change. Our administrative staff has been looking at our computer use policy, and right now our policy requires an opt-in approval process, meaning technically all students, in order to use any computer in the district, have to have a form filled out and signed by themselves and their parents in order to grant the school permission to allow them to use our machines and opt in. We're proposing to the board policy committee for review and then ultimately to the full board an opt-out policy. An opt-in policy in 2019 is very difficult for us to manage. It's expected that children have access to the internet and our network and our computers. So managing who has permission as opposed to who doesn't have permission is very difficult for our building staff. So the request is to make some changes in the verbiage and how the policy works so it's an opt-out policy. So again, those requests will go out to the policy committee for review. The policy committee endorses it, bring it back to the full board. Just want to see some reports of where that's on its way. Also, my last announcement, last year or the year before, the board challenged us to reestablish a program where elementary students went up to the high school and planetarium visits. And we did reestablish that. I just want to make sure everybody knows that that's starting again this year within the next couple of weeks. So, elementary kids going. Thank you, elementary and high school staff, for making sure that that works. And with that, yes. With that, I'll pass it over to Pat to do his financial.
Hey, good evening, thank you. So, it's a little bit difficult to look at what's on the screen. The board all has a copy in front of them. We'll get this posted on the district's website, so anybody who has an interest in looking at the numbers to actually see them, that'll be available. This is the first look at our 5-year look ahead. As we continue through the budget process and the numbers firm up, we will continue to update this along with periodic updates at the meetings and the budget presentation, and we'll put the most relevant information up on the district's website. But just for example, right now we sit with about $11.96 million between reserves and assigned and unassigned fund balance. That's a decrease from the previous year, so that at the end of 17-18 we have the 11.96 million. At the end of 16-17 school year we had about 13.5 million. We experienced an operating deficit of about 1.56 million in the 17-18 school year, which brings us to the 11.96. Going forward, we do have our preliminary tax cap calculation done. It's not the finished calculation yet, but it's going to be very close. And that's about 2.71% increase in the levy, which would bring our allowable levy up from about 34.7 million to about 35.7 million. It's about 963,000 and some change. So the big impact to look at as we move forward is our continuing operating deficit, which we are aware of and continues until we start to see some of the debt that we have outstanding dropping off. So we are anticipating right now about a $1.7 million operational deficit in 18-19 school year, which were planned operational deficits. We knew these were going to occur. Drops down to about 1.5 million in the 19-20 school year. And then we start to see debt drop off. So in the 2021 school year, we see a reduction of $500,000 in the debt payment. And we also see our operational deficit drop by about that much. And then the year after that, we have a $1.2 million tax cert debt payment that drops off. And again, we see a significant amount of the operational deficit drop off. So by the 21-22 school year, we've started to rebuild reserves to fund balance. So it's kind of like that soft landing that we've talked about a number of times. Everything is continuing along those lines as we anticipated. So we do see in that year where the first debt drops off and we start to make the switch, we kind of bottom out at a total fund balance and reserves of about $6.26 million. And now that still maintains our 4% allowable fund balance, which is our legal limit on allowable unassigned fund balance. And it gives us almost $4 million on top of that as continuing buffer. So we will have, as time goes on and we get more into the details of the financial plan, we'll have more information on what those continuing operating deficits look like going forward. But this is kind of the picture where we are, still very strong financially. Not only do we keep our 4% fund balance, but again, at the lowest point where we've run down what we did accumulate for a number of years in anticipation of this circumstance, we're still in excess of $6 million in reserves and fund balance. So that's pretty much the summary right now. We will, again, as we go on throughout the spring and we continue to work at developing a budget, as all those numbers start to gel up, we'll continuously do updates to these projections. But the material impact is not going to differ much from what we present now.
For board and public perspective, our first proposed budget presentation will be at the next board meeting. So anticipate that next meeting we will be discussing Vision 2020 at the high school with our architect, but we'll also be discussing the 1920 operating budget with our first proposed look at what that is.
Right.
For this group, for the public, and for the board to start to give us direction.
We'll have some information on what a rollover budget looks like, and then some discussion on potential program enhancements or adjustments to that budget.
Correct.
Any questions from the board?
I do, Pat. Starting in 2021, I see the fund balance, well, actually starting that year and going forward, the fund balance starts to go up a little, but the operating deficit remains fairly constant. So how is that happening? And at the same time, reserves are going up too. So how is that?
So the operational deficit is that last line, right down at the bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the deficit.
That I should have hid that. That's more of a number that I use to calculate, and they're negative. What that is that's our 4% buffer, John. So when we say we budget and we budget at 96% of anticipated expenditures, we have money that we put in as a buffer. That's that same money that we don't spend every year coming back out.
Okay, so then the actual operating deficit is doing the opposite of what I just said. It hits the bottom of, it hits 960 still as a deficit, and then the negative
year
represents actually
correct,
flipped, like
correct.
a surplus.
Correct.
It's not a surplus. You're in the red. You're in the black. So
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Thank you.
John? Orange Coastal
So good evening, everybody. Last night's meeting at Orange Coastal BOCES, the big push is that they're going to start Sunday and Monday. They're going to be in Albany, trying to meet all the new legislators that have been elected in the past year. And speaking to Pat's point about fund balance, that's going to be one of the things that they're going to try to push, to try to get them to look at increasing the limit on the fund balance. It's one of the big points that they were making last night. A couple of other things they were talking about is they're trying to look to make charter schools and non-public schools answer to the same requirements and standards that public schools answer to. So there's a lot of little things that you can go to the BOCES website and see, but those are the two main things that they're going to be trying to lobby for when they go to Albany. Beyond that, they were talking about, there was a presentation from Orange County Youth Bureau. They do a lot of good things for children and youth in the area, and they've updated their directory. They wanted me to point that out to everybody, so you can go to their website and see all the services that they have available. Thank you.
For Ulster BOCES, we had a meeting, actually Mike and I both attended. Ulster brings in the legislators every year in January before so we had an opportunity to meet with all of our legislators or staff members. They seem very optimistic. Obviously, there's been major changes in Albany, and they are moving forward on a lot of different fronts. All the districts really had an opportunity to talk about the different issues with funding and really trying to return control back to the districts rather than state ed, and the legislators coming up with all these brilliant ideas that really don't work. So that was a real good opportunity for us to meet, talk with them, get the concerns out there. You know, and I know we talked about this once before here at a recent meeting, but the foundation aid. You know, everybody's in a different spot with foundation aid, but most of the districts, actually in Ulster County, the closest one to us on a shortage is New Paltz, and they're short like 27% of where they should be. The problem is we're short 77%. We're still below where we should be going forward. So, and these are based on NISBA's numbers. So we were able to get that information out to them in a really good setting where they spent about 2 hours answering questions back and forth and taking information in. They will, you know, a group will still be going to Albany again also, but I thought it was, you know, a very productive night and a good chance, especially with all the changes in the legislators across the board, in all the different districts. And you got to talk to people other than just our own, because it was all that were represented, that covered any district in Ulster County. So it was very productive. Okay, student report, Matt.
So I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I know we're all very excited to hear the presentation about the new things that are going to be happening here at the middle school. It could be potentially happening, so I promise to not talk too long. I got 2 main points I'd like to touch on tonight. First, I'd like to start by highlighting a group of students at Marlboro High School in the SUNY Ulster College English program. Students recently just finished their end of semester portfolios. So as a part of this course, students are required to create a portfolio of all their writing assignments and literary works that they worked on throughout the semester, as well as perform an on-demand writing final that was sent up to Ulster and graded by SUNY Ulster professors. So I'm excited to announce that 100% of students enrolled in this program passed and received the 3 college credits for this course, which is just phenomenal. So all the board and the superintendent should have received an invitation for a celebration in the Marlboro High School libraries, where you'll be allowed to view some of these portfolios and listen to some students read off their works. So I hope you all can attend that. It's going to be a great event. Another thing I'd like to touch on would be Chromebooks. As many of you know, Chromebooks were distributed last week to 6th grade students. So now all students grades 6 to 12 have their own personal Chromebook, which I think is phenomenal. I know back in September I reported on when the Chromebooks were first rolled out to high school students about the benefits. And I thought now would be a good time to share some of the continued growth in the use of the Chromebooks in the classroom that I saw. So throughout the year, I've slowly seen the Chromebook use migrate from primarily English history to math and science, which usually in math class, you know, if you get a work, teachers might hand out a worksheet or something and send kids home with problems. But if kids struggled in class that day, they're looking at this sheet and they have no idea what to do, and if their parents might not be able to help them at a high school level. Right? So what the teachers have been doing now, and I've seen at least 3 or 4 math teachers at Marlboro High School do this, is they employ this program such as Delta Math or Alex, they're called. So what they do is they send out these programs. Each student has an individual account they log into, and they get like a problem set based on what they're learning in class that day. And students can move at their own pace and solve these problems. And also on this website, they also have examples of problems. So if a student is stuck, they can look at these practice problems and see examples of a teacher on there actually doing it, and hopefully learn, see the steps that are needed, and correct their mistakes. Additionally, teachers can set a minimum number of problems for homework credit, but the program keeps going. So say if a student has a test the next day and needs additional practice, then they can just keep going with practice problems until they feel ready to be prepared. So I think this is a great trend that we're seeing the technology used in the classroom, and I think if this keeps up, this will be a really exciting place to learn in Marlboro. So with that, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Just one quick thing, Matt. Your teachers can also look at Delta Math and see how many minutes you're spending on your homework.
Okay, Vision 2020.
Okay, so if there's anything that we can hold as a paramount responsibility we have in education, it's to support learning environments. And we approach that from two different perspectives. First of all, we have to maintain fiscal responsibility. If we can't pay for our obligations, it doesn't matter the obligations that we make because they haven't gone away. It's paramount. But we also have to maintain our physical plan. And this district has done a wonderful job over the last several decades of making sure that their physical plans are well established and well taken care of. We have a tremendous facilities and operation group led by Mr. Cavazza that takes extraordinary pride in making sure that things work, that things look good, that things smell good, that things sound good. That's just what they do. It's in their core. And I thank you very much for that, Mr. Cavazza. There are certainly some points in time that we do have to do more for our physical plans in order to support learning environments that we can't do out of a regular operating budget. Our regular operating budget supports a lot of things. Some of them are direct instruction tools. Matt just spoke about some of them. Some of them are things that you don't see. Make sure that these lights work. Make sure it's warm in here. Make sure it's cool during the summer. Making sure all of that works is a tremendous responsibility. And we've gotten to the point where there are a few things that we need to spend some true and real concentrated time talking with our public, talking with our board, and really vetting through to see what work do we have to do, how much does it cost, and how are we going to pay for it. But remember, our paramount responsibility is supporting education for our children and maintaining a fiscally sound structure. How do we do the two? That's what I'm asking you to follow on the journey. For the next couple of months, the next 4 board meetings, we're going to be spending a concentrated amount of time looking at plans, talking about plans, and walking around schools so we can show you some things that we have decided need to be brought to the public and to this Board of Education to say, here's some stuff, what do we want to do about it as a community? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our architect that we've hired to help us through this process. He's been a wonderful shepherd so far. Tom Ritzentola from CS Arch. Worked very hard on this project, so getting us to this point has been a bit of a mad dash, but it's not unconcentrated work. It's been a lot, very concentrated amount of time in his office, from our administrative team, from our instructional team to get to tonight. So we're excited to get this started.
Yes, and good evening. And just before I begin, Mr. Jackson, that was probably one of the best prepared, most articulate student representative presentations I've ever seen in a board meeting. So kudos to you. That was very well put together and very well done.
Tom, if I could, that's what it takes to be a Duke, right?
And it shows. It shows. So tonight, certainly for my viewpoint, is kind of a landmark night for the board, I think, as we start to begin to delve into a lot of the planning that's gone on kind of behind the scenes and with the administrators. And certainly we spent a lot of time talking with the administrators and other staff members, and certainly thank them for a lot of time, probably more time than they even thought was going to be involved to get to this point. So we're going to focus on the middle school. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process. So it starts with review of the last building condition survey that was done in the district. That's 2015. We talk about that in relationship also to the district's 5-year plan and the capital plan. Then what we're in now is a visioning process. And this is where we look at review of what many, as far as administrators, believe are And then other items, we'll touch upon a few of them as we go through, other items that were identified in the building condition survey, like replacement of the fire safety systems in this building, upgrading some of those systems as well. We'll touch on a few of those. So this is the existing floor plans of the building. Again, we've updated the district's plans to reflect the actual conditions that exist in electronic format so that we can use these as our baseline for moving forward and making recommendations. And so this is just a larger version of that, and what we're trying to do is go from this version, which is the existing, to this version, which is with all of the recommended improvements in all of the areas that I identified. And so I want to just highlight these and show you what they entail. So if I do an overlay, so you can see they entail, in this case, a new band chorus room. You can see it's absent from the middle of the courtyard. The student support services, the main office, and for anyone who's familiar with this building, you can see that the main office actually is moved, it's relocated to a space which we feel better serves both the entry and the secured vestibule of the building, as opposed to entering the building through a required egress stair. Music, the innovation lab, which would come up from the downstairs, computer lab and tech, and the computer lab would be shared between the innovation lab and tech. So improvements to the auditorium, gymnasium, a centralized set of toileting rooms, and I'll show you this in larger detail in a few minutes. Upgraded PE spaces to replace the existing obsolete locker rooms. Nursing, a change to move the SRO. The SRO is currently in that space right adjacent to us. And we would do that so that we could provide a set of toilet rooms in that location to serve the students in the lunch program, so they don't have to traverse the entire building to get to a restroom. And then the improvements to the serving line and the cafeteria. So that's really what we'll be looking at with respect to the middle school. And I think at this point we wanted to break and give you an opportunity to tour the building with us so you can see some of the existing spaces in real time. And here's that main office arrangement. So you can see we got a nice set of double doors that exist that bring us into a secure vestibule. You have your greeter right here, again, in a little room that's also protected, so we're protecting that individual. Small little waiting area, and then we have a door here where they can be buzzed into the main office. This is a wall of glass, it's impact-resistant glazing, and so there's visibility with bringing somebody into the building all the way through and into the main office. So the first area of security is the secure vestibule. The second is they come into the office. And only after vetting their business in the office are they then into the corridor system itself. And then, of course, from the office functions, we have the transaction counter, we have the mailbox area for the faculty, we have the clerical support, we have the vice principal or assistant principal, a small conference room, the principal's office, toileting, the vault, and a little convenience like kitchenette. For the staff. So then across the hall, which used to be the main office, and you can see this is a little bit larger area. This would be the new student support suite. So we have the 4 offices for counselors and psychologists. We have a dedicated storage space, and then we have this outer area for that student resource planning and ability to access computers, charging stations, etc. Up front, we have the entrance in with a little waiting area and clerical support. And then, of course, here we also have a dedicated conferencing area itself. So you can see these offices are set up to where they can have a small conference within the office, and then there's dedicated conference space, a little bit larger for some larger group conferences that might involve not only the student, but parents or other faculty members. So moving down the hall, remember we talked about what was now the student support area is now the music room. And then now we're talking about this area. So you can see the proposed new band chorus room with instrument storage, with storage and practice rooms, music office, exits to the courtyard. So in this case, that piece is the new construction, and I'm going to show you several iterations of different ways that we looked at putting this construction on the end of the building. So this is one, but they're all roughly the same amount of square footage. Another option would be to pull it back further, and we're doing this because we need to get a roadway around it, and we needed to look at that relative to serving this cafeteria space and serving the space to allow dump trucks to come back in and pick up the refuse. So this is very similar. Again, it doesn't have the access through to the courtyard, but it does have the instrument storage, the practice rooms, and other storage. You can see here we've inserted a little stage area so that we can alleviate some of that scheduling issue with the PE and chorus practice. And then you would also exit out and down the staircase, but you could also exit right to the exterior. And then finally, the option that I think we actually prefer the most actually tilts this on an angle. This provides the best ability for us to get the access road around and have the least impact to the site from a perspective of retaining walls that would be required. I also think it gives us a little more means to provide a little architectural expression on this on the new construction. But again, you get your instrument storage, you get your practice rooms, you can see the stage area. Again, the stage area would be, this is all flat floor, would actually have a rampway from within for accessibility as well. And so there we would be looking at that piece of the construction. I also think that we might be able to, and we've shown it here, we actually showed a door in between the music and the band chorus room for interconnectivity. So let me work our way down the corridor. Of course, this would be the innovation lab that's currently in the basement area. Here's that CAD computer room on the corner that's between the innovation lab and the new space for technology. A nice space would be developed and work in conjunction with that as well. And then moving around the corner, here you see that central set of group toilet rooms for men and women with some custodial areas in between. Again, these have greater capacity than you currently have, would serve well the gymnasium auditorium functions with collections of presentations or events that happen in that space. Here you see we have the, following this down the hallway, we have the existing coach's office, and then you can see the two new locker rooms. Again, appropriately sized for the number of students in the building. Each has its own dedicated toilet room associated with it. These are really change rooms with a toilet within them. No showers in these locker rooms, and there hasn't been showers in the existing ones for Lord knows how long. So a long time. In fact, in the boys' rooms, it's actually blocked off. So here you can see we get a janitorial closet. Here's the new nurses suite. So we have the nurses station, we have dedicated storage, we have an exam room, a daybed area with triage, and then a dedicated toilet room within the nurses suite. And then here's the SRO office adjacent to it. And then these are the existing classrooms that are there currently. In the gymnasium, we talked about the improvements in there, so I won't go through that again. And then again, working our way to this space, to the cafeteria, the real improvements would be, of course, taking the SRO's office and putting in toileting. And then you can see what we've done is we've taken this wall that really blocks off all the serving and really condenses it. And we would remove that wall in its entirety, open up the cafeteria serving, increase the queue line, so we make use of a lot of wasted space back in this corner that's not used during the cafeteria seatings. And this would now become the new serving lines, in and out, 2 individual lines with the POS systems in the middle. And we would obviously update the ceiling materials as well when that wall got removed. Certainly a big enhancement for this facility. So now I'm going to have George from the Chasing Companies come up and talk a little bit about the site, the site work that's being considered and being reviewed in association with traffic flow and et cetera.
So we had an opportunity to take a look at the bus loading or unloading process in the morning. And, it runs very well for the way it's set up. I think it's a fair statement. I think people spend a lot of time trying to best use the amount of space that's set up right there right now. I know you guys have looked at transporting kids to the high school. You do a kind of a stage system. Kids go off queued up at the high school as well. So there are approximately 18 buses or so that roll through here in the morning, and about 20% of the student population that comes through parent drop-off. So it's a pretty good number of vehicles passing through the rear of the school. So most of the vehicles enter into the school over here. Right now they pass through and then they come out and then exit obviously out the front down the line. The staff that comes to the school comes in and comes around to the side. They park along this area over here. It's not shown very well on this diagram here, but there's parking along this side of the building. There's parking out here in the front, and then of course there's parking in what I consider the back parking lot. And a few additional spots over on the side here. So when we looked at the building, we looked at this, or the projects, we looked at the outside for really 3 purposes. The first purpose was, is there a better way to handle the bus drop-off and the parent drop-off pattern, especially in the morning? It seems to be the biggest time for getting back up. What ends up happening is if everybody doesn't know exactly how to move their vehicle and where to be dropping off and when they can be dropping off the students, the traffic ends up backing all the way up to the top of the hill up by Prospect. So it's not an ideal situation from a traffic movement perspective. So we've come up with a couple of concepts for that, and really what we're trying to do is we're trying to separate the buses a little bit more from the parent drop-off. So on the front side, the buses would be able to come up the same driveway in this particular example and drop off the students in the rear of the school, and they would continue to enter the same entrance that they enter today, which is the stairwell entrance. The parents would drive around behind from a separated island from the buses and would actually come up to the side of the building and then enter into the new entrance that's being talked about for the school. So that would be through, right past the main office, the new main office location. And the purpose for this is that it gets the parent queue, which is really what is the most inconsistent flow pattern that's going on outside. All you need is one parent who doesn't do this every day, whether it's a grandparent or someone who normally takes a bus. And that entire queue process is impacted. So if anybody's had the luxury of dropping your child off here, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's basically the pattern that we're trying to set up here. In all of these options, and we'll look at this more closely, there is the current and the future need to get a vehicle, specifically food deliveries and garbage pickup, has to come around behind the building here. That's where the support services are from the cafeteria that we're in right now. So it's something that we always have to keep in mind when we're looking at the site plan. So another option that we're looking at, and again, these are all just options that we're looking at right now, is to actually relocate the driveway that comes in the rear of the building. So it would actually come in at the rear of the staff parking lot, kind of like up on the top of the hill there before it drops down to the athletic fields in the rear. So the entrance would continue to be a one-way entrance in, and it would follow a very similar concept where, again, we're trying to separate the parent drop-off and the bus drop-off, but they would swing around on the far side and then be lined up to head directly down to 9W. A lot of the staff parking, which would have been eliminated because we relocated that driveway, would actually be relocated closer to the building and out of the pattern for the bus and parent drop-off. We did observe that when some of the staff is coming in, they're actually kind of playing the Frogger game of going between the parent drop-off and the buses. So that's something we're going to do. Again, these are just concepts. So one other topic I'll mention when we're here, and that we're referring to this as the Road A plan, which is design that was created for the housing project or housing complex that's just north of our property here. That project is proposing an entrance that will come in along their road A, it doesn't have a name yet, and then of course an exit back onto the road A and try and utilize the light at the intersection there. So in all of our concepts that we're preparing, we're hopeful that at some point that would be an option for the school to use, but we are not basing our design on that option, because if that project never comes to fruition, we don't want to suddenly have the school in a position where that's constraining our overall movement of the town. So if you look at the building addition that Tom showed you some different options inside the building, that's the orange shape that you're seeing here. So if you notice the angled one, which is the one I'm asking Tom to consider more closely, it actually hugs the building a little bit closer, which is very helpful for us because we're trying to get trucks around behind the building. So with this option here, it sticks out a little bit further. We're further out onto that slope. So if anybody wants to do a sidewalk, we can take a break and go through that. So, I'm sure everybody knows that there's a large slope over here. Yeah. There's also, just for everybody's understanding, a little spot right in here, I'm just pointing the right spot. There's actually the gas regulator for the natural gas that comes into the building. So just another obstacle to work on. So we've looked at a couple different options to come around behind the building with the service for the cafeteria. They all follow a very similar concept, which is to provide a driveway that gets around behind the building. And again, this is just concept. So a vehicle will come in, back up, do the business that they need to do, and then leave. If it's a garbage truck, this area right in here would be the new dumpster location. Again, very convenient for that staff, still accessible, and easy to work with. This green line looks very simple there, but that's a retaining wall. So in this particular layout, we're looking at a wall that would be anywhere from 12 to 14 feet in height. That's a significant cost and impact to the project for construction. In the earlier slide, we had this layout here, and we started laying that wall in place. We were looking at a wall well over 20 feet. So the cost would escalate very quickly, which is why we're really looking at the layout of the actual addition. This area back in here is currently paved or has that the metal building in application, so it's a combination of both. We would look to remove all of the pavement and the building as well. And this is that courtyard area that Tom was referring to, or outdoor space that could be used for a stage setting. And again, we can keep that very simple, simply by keeping it simple features such as grass and a little bit of seating around the edges. It doesn't have to get complex. So in the earlier slides, when we showed the building coming out and of course the driveway coming around, we've knocked out several staff parking spots. And at least on the morning that we were here looking, About 90-95% of the parking spaces are in use, at least during the hours we're here. So when you guys are holding any type of event, everybody's parking everywhere else so they can find a space. So we looked at the parking lot that's down at the bottom of the hill as an option, and we have just two concepts right now. They have not really been vetted out very closely. One would be a concept where you could basically come in and out from two locations along the street, and you would just continue to have parking that faces out towards the roadway. The advantage of this is this green line, again, another retaining wall, really is only going to be about 4 feet high, so that cost for those spaces may be very beneficial. The disadvantage, of course, is we would be in a discussion with the town about putting in another driveway or curb cut. So that's obviously a hurdle to be discussed if that's an option that we take. This option here would continue to utilize the parking spaces that are already out here, which is this row of spaces here, and then we would push into the hill. The disadvantage, of course, of this option is that you would have to build a retaining wall that's much higher. It's about 8 to 10 feet high. So it's a significant cost for those additional spaces. In both options, it's about the same number of parking spaces. So there's no clear advantage of an exceptional amount of parking in either option.
I got a question on all these diagrams don't account for any student drop-off down at the lower parking lot, which happens every day. Is that shouldn't be happening now? Are you going to disallow it, or what do you do?
Yeah, so we did see some students come up there. I didn't count the number of students who are coming up there, basically we dropped off. And certainly from the parent drop-off perspective, we have not decided if either option is better. I would think that the option A would work better for a drop-off because we could flow through the parking lot in single flow direction. The school talked about, the administration talked about, they would put a staff member at the rear stairwell, and they would certainly be willing to continue to do that. So it's not on or off right here, it's just
Just a retaining wall question. Option A, it looks like that retaining wall would work better with the upper retaining wall. It looks like option B, retaining wall, will have conflict with the upper retaining wall for the roadway back that you guys showed before.
Yeah, so depending on which building configuration we end up with, that will impact how far out that wall will go. So you're right, in certain scenarios that could be an impact. For now, because this is a conceptual idea at this point, right now we're just assuming that it's a wall that's going to go up a vertical distance, just purely a pragmatic component. In reality, we want to look at that wall and want to discuss with the district actually doing some type of tier system as well. It's just very early to wrap up that. But you're correct, depending on which configuration or location.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it for me, I could see visually agree that there's going to be definitely conflict with doing the height of the walls that they are and the locations of them. So a tiered system would be better. I think the option A, working with that angled music room is really the ideal, I would honestly.
Yeah, the concern, when you go back to your bus option, A and B, I don't see how either of them work if we wind up with Road A. Because the students are gonna, you've got a divided area that if the parents drop them and go down that road, they're not gonna walk in the road to get to the new entrance.
So we don't have it drawn on these particular diagrams, but in all scenarios, we would like the buses to continue to queue the way they have been doing. We want that for two reasons. One is if there is a backup, it's a pretty secondary street, that out behind it.
The neighbors would differentiate that.
I'm sure they would.
With you.
But again, a lot of that backup right now, at least from what we saw on the time we were out there, is actually the parent drop-off component of it. It's not really the bus drivers They do this every day for 185 days a year. They know the process pretty quickly. So what's happening is the buses are coming in. They line up right now about 6 buses at a shop. They basically batch the students out and then close their doors, and then the next group comes in. So the buses will make their way through here pretty quickly.
Yeah, but the buses, if we wind up with that Road A, the buses won't be able to go down the current road. Because if they need to get to the middle school, they have to go down Road A. You're not gonna be able to turn left at the bottom of that current road. You'd only be able to turn right and go south.
So if Road A goes in, it basically runs parallel with the length of our property. This is a new cooling system for your internal systems for the school. So the proposal from the neighboring property is to bring the driveway in right about here. And again, that's just a proposal. And then the exit right now is right in this location.
But just to understand, it's more than a proposal. We've agreed to the location of that.
Okay.
We've signed off an MOA on that property and where that cut through would be.
So
Because they have a legal right of way through our property.
okay. So from a parent drop-off perspective, we would envision that the parents would come up Road A, come around, circle around, and drop off here, and then, of course, head right back out. So their drop-off location would continue right in this location, which is where we want them to drop off students. The buses would continue to come in here and then come through, and then we'd have to bring the buses through there. So we'll have to look at that a little bit more, for sure. But the idea is to reconnect them back out there if we can.
You know, and I'll point out, I've even given up my spot on campus. I have, there's a spot for Mini Coopers only. It's like right here. I thought it was nice that I came to the school and they instantly dedicated a spot for me to park, and I thought that was great. So, but those are gonna have to go away. So.
Can I ask a question to Ms. Clinton or Mr. Stenmeyer? So there's lots of parent drop-off down in the lower parking lot. I don't know the volume compared to up, but there's a lot. And they don't have a consistent means of doing it. Some come in and turn around, some drop off in the street, the kids cross between, including faculty coming in, and some parents stay there until whatever time they want to, their kids feel like leaving the car. So is that not supposed to happen? Like I always, when I do it, I thought that was the means. Like, to be honest with you, I never ever came up the front. And maybe I'm supposed to be. But what is the recommendation, or what do we tell parents about drop-offs down below? Or should we be doing that at all?
So at 6th grade orientation is probably the one time that we really talk about it. And what we had decided a few years ago, we constantly revisit, and we've had many different, the DOT group that was here and all different groups, to ease the flow with the arrival, drop-off, and buses. We've encouraged parents, when possible, to drop down at the lower lot and have the students come up the staircase. And that's why we keep the guidance door, if you will, outside door open. Some parents, if they're coming down Birdsville, they come up and then they just head back out. So we definitely do encourage both. You know, obviously, I requested specifically that they join me at 7 in the morning and watch the whole kit and caboodle as it unfolds, because as much as I could explain it, I thought it was really important for them to see. And I thank you for recognizing that we do kind of the best we can in an abbreviated amount of time. But yes, we do encourage both, because otherwise the backup on Birdsville really becomes even more evident. And seriously, if one car doesn't really know the flow and they're waiting for the buses and the buses' lights are yellow and those buses aren't unloading, you quickly will see a backup. So anybody down at the bottom, we do encourage if they can.
So I don't remember the orientation. Did you get to the level of detail where you want people to come in the faculty lot and come around, or that you want them to drop off on the street, or no, you never designated? You know what I mean?
Well, we've differentiated where if you're coming, say, from the southern end of 9W, when you're coming and we want you to use that lot down the stairway. If you're coming down Birdsall, you want to go through the flow through where the buses are. So we did kind of go through how that would work at the bottom of the stairs there. So again, it takes patience because some cars are going to want to go still up Birdsall and come back around. Some are going to want to go towards where the buses go, and some could turn around in the lot and go back out towards 9W. So again, if you're coming from 9W, we do ask that you use the lot at the bottom of the stairs.
I think I can answer some of it too. The parking lot's a parking lot, so it's really unwieldy to go in and turn around and come back out. And certainly some people do that, and that throws things off. And one thing was pointed out very clearly to us when we worked with the town and the DOT folks. We have no ability at all to regulate what happens on Birdsall. So trying to encourage the split where people can drop off at the Birdsall sidewalk, I'll call it, or come in the Birdsall entrance onto our property by driving, helps with cutting the volume up top. But the difficulty is that we can't say, you must stop here, you must go, we can't even strike. There's some real restrictions, and as soon as we start to even enter into that dialogue, the folks from the town and say, whoa, Yeah, I think it's a public road, you can't regulate it. So. I'm asking specific because of the parking lot, because this is what I do, as many others do. You come in, if you come early enough, there's not enough cars parked, you can do a nice turnaround, drop them off right at the sidewalk and walk up the stairs. Some people block it and you come around. But in doing that, a lot of people don't do that. Even if they're coming up Birdsall in the same direction, you got kids coming in off the street, you got kids coming in off the lower parking lot in between cars, and you have cars, faculty coming in. And I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm doing it wrong. So maybe, but I'm just wondering if we need to maybe regulate in that, or what do you want to do? Do you not want people to come in and turn around at all? They either come up or just drop off?
Maybe that's a discussion for another time on the design side, because you're right. I think they're trying to address that by creating a drive-through parking lot.
As only
in that lower
as the
area.
only way.
That you can drive through, well, no, not necessarily only, but it would be a drive-through parking lot as opposed to a one-way in, one-way out. So that's different than fixing what we currently have because of a line of sight issue.
And the other, I'll add to that, you don't ever want to really have the students exit the car on the opposite side of the road, because now you have a crossing that the student has to make. That's some of the difficulty with even where the buses are the students are coming off the buses and parents are impatient, not wanting to wait, and the students exit at all different points along that drive. And so now all the flow is not seamless, and it's a potential hazard. So when people are coming down Birdsall, they're dropping students on the opposite side of the road, that creates a crossing condition that's unsafe. The through lot would allow everyone, even coming down Birdsall, to turn around in that lot and always drop curbside, the safest condition for the students, and then exit either way from.
So there was an account for that. I didn't pick up on that.
Well, and also that DOT study, it actually started with a roundabout in that little location that we tried, I think. But there wasn't enough.
It's difficult to say the least. I don't think there'll be any one perfect solution, but I think, part of is to just take it one step at a time. I think part of it is getting how the traffic flows from a physical standpoint, and then, there is an operational, component to this. Properly instructing the parents, drop-off zones, appropriate ways to drop the students off, and then how the flow works with respect to busing and vehicular traffic. So, we ready to move on a little bit? Everybody, any other questions? I don't want to leave it if there's good questions to be heard. So I put this in, and I had this in the previous presentation. Of course, we do have to go through the state environmental quality review process. We have to clear that prior to the board adopting any resolution to put up any bond. Certainly, we're reviewing all of what's being proposed as to whether it would trigger any different process for seeker that we would have to go through. I think right now, George will tell me otherwise. I think right now, we're thinking this will be a type 2 action. We'll be able to proceed to show that as a type 2 action. But, that's going to depend on, how we address the exterior. Mostly it's really the new construction piece and the exterior improvements to the road networks. And if we had to do something other than a type 2 action, the board would obviously have to declare lead agent status. We'd have to have a 30-day notification and so forth. Just wanted the board to be aware of that. That's still in process, but I think we're close to understanding. We think it's going to be a type 2 action. As you might recall from the previous presentation, we also talked about the various funding sources. There are a lot of ways to fund a capital project. Your annual budgetary appropriation. You've got capital outlay money, so $100,000 a year. There's a $125,000 Larkin Athletic Facilities Grant, because we are talking about some athletic improvements. A $200,000 Larkin grant. You had the previous presentation, the previous board meeting, you had the presentation by the energy performance contracting from Siemens, Mr. Tagney from Siemens. And then, of course, there's also the understanding that you could put up a capital bond referendum to the community for a vote. So those are all of the various funding sources available to consider making these improvements. We talk about the decision making. As Mr. Brooks indicated, we have 4 or 5 more meetings over the next month or so. We're going to be meeting at each of the schools to do similar to what we did tonight at the middle school. So that's February 7th where we are now. The next meeting will be held at the high school where we talk about these same sets of considerations for the high school. And then on March 7th at the elementary school, and on March 7th the financial team will also be available, the folks, your financial advisors, to talk a little bit about the funding aspects as well. The intention is to look to March 21st to present somewhat of a final recommendation for board's consideration. And if that was agreeable to the board, we would look to develop referendum communications material. But ultimately, if the board wanted to put something up to the community along with the budget vote, that resolution would have to be approved on April 4th at the board meeting to facilitate the 45-day public comment period. And then from April 5th to May 20th is that 45-day period, and then bond vote on the 21st. So moving that forward, if there was a bond vote on the 21st, you can see we would have a design process that we have to go through to document all of these improvements to submit to the State Education Department for review and approval. That will take 6 to 7 months. They're pretty detailed and intensive renovation projects. SED, we would request an outsourced review rather than sit in the queue for 48 weeks or whatever it is now, lose an entire year. We would look to outsource the review. That's typically taking now 4 to 8 weeks, so that we can hit a public bid process in early February, March of 2020, with a construction period beginning sometime in the spring. And then, with what is being presented, we're looking at this probably a 2 summers worth of construction, so it close out sometime by October of 2021. This was probably the longest board presentation we've ever done, which is a good thing. Any questions?
I just have one. I didn't notice any mention of any upgrades for the athletic field, but I did see the grant money. Is there some plan to use that money for things like the track upgrade or anything else like that?
Yes, and I didn't have a slide prepared for that, but the track upgrade is part of what's being recommended for this site. And as we start to bring the board the information on all of the budget estimates, you'll see that it's pretty lengthy. We do very detailed line by line. You'll also see that as some recommended improvements at the high school as well.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comment on the agenda items. Any comments on the agenda items?
Joanne Reed Newkirk. I have noticed, because I've been watching the tapes at home, I noticed the last board meeting we hired Tony Perugino's daughter as a substitute. This night we hired John Myro's son as a substitute teacher. So my question is, did they get on the board to bring your family on?
Just for clarity, anybody that makes it to an agenda for a recommendation for me goes through a strict process of hiring. Substitutes are hired by Robin Heck through a process that's equally treated for all. We are an equal opportunity employer. Robin and I have a very clear communication system on how that process works. So there are no improprieties as far as my perspective goes that they aren't working with that. I just want to make sure that I'm clear as far as the process that takes place for anyone that applies for a job in Marlborough. We are an equal opportunity employer. We vet all applicants for all positions on an equal basis. For substitutes, Robin hires substitutes for our professional teaching.
Any other public comments on the agenda? Okay, move to the consent agenda. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the contracts, agreements, and reports as presented. Personnel recommendations, donations, contracts for health and welfare, non-resident tuition rates report, unofficial board meeting minutes of January 17, 2019. Can I get a motion? James, second. Russell, any discussion? Please cast your votes.
I voted.
Yes. I voted to abstain.
So Russell was a yes. Susan?
Yes.
Yes. John? Abstain.
No, yes, I'll do it verbally.
No, yes. Sorry. You got it.
He came up and then said, you know.
So motion carried, 6.
Yes. Okay. Old business. Anybody have any old business? Everybody got the notice on the Ulster Board of Education Friends of Education Award. Has anybody got any recommendations? Okay. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, who was that?
Ann Casey? Is everybody, any other discussion on that? I think she does a lot, she's still doing a lot, even though she's retired. So I think it's a great idea. All in favor? Any opposed? So we have our answer there. And we still have to, I mean, we talked about this briefly, Facilities Committee, we really need to look at our rooms that are named, because we've got the 2 that we've been talking about, that we really gotta, we shouldn't get through the school year and not wrap that up. Now,
Frank, could you remind
me where that is or what you're referring to?
We were trying to do an inventory of what places in the district that we had named for certain people, so that we could look to recognize Pat Russo and,
Jim Catalano.
yes,
Jimmy Furlan.
Jimmy Cortolano.
Catalano.
Catalano. Both very long-time board members that passed away.
Both of those are on my desk, and we will bring those out to the facilities committee, which we agreed on. You're right. We'll get working on it, get that to the facilities committee.
And then the last thing is, I'd really like to, so we could wrap that up from my end with the whole business, was the board meeting for June. Does anybody have a real preference?
Yes. For the 17th.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with the 17th? All in favor of the 17th? Can I give a minute to check? Sure. That's Monday the 17th of June instead of the 20th. Well, it's currently scheduled for the 20th.
And the other option is the 27th.
And the other option is the 27th. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, I
All in
agree with
favor? Any opposed? So it'll be the 7th, Monday the 17th. Anybody else have any old business? Any new business? Any other items?
I have one. I saw in the onboard. Yeah. Great. There was a lot of good stuff in there. But for anyone that is actually interested in running for the Board of Education, I see that it seems to be a state trend that they are, overall, we're not getting enough people to come out to fill the seats. So what NYSBA, the New York State School Board Association, has decided to do is create a specific website geared toward basically giving people information who perhaps are interested in such a position, kind of like a one-stop shop website to go to understand, excuse me, to understand how to run, what it means to campaign, the roles and the responsibilities. So if anyone has future interest, there is now a resource that you can go to.
And it's right on NYSBA's.
It's NYSBA.com, I think it's like /experience or something like that.
And just to add to what Susan's saying, Orange County actually talked about this last night. They asked me to speak. They're having an event March 30th for anyone that wants to come, like a workshop thing. They want me to speak like first year, what was your experience? It's new people that want to come out.
Okay. Any other items?
I've got something. At the last board meeting, Mr. Brooks, you mentioned something about somewhat of a dialogue with the new head man at Dan Scammer, and the possibility of him coming to a meeting here. I was wondering if the board ended up taking any action on that. If so, when? What meeting would that be?
We're tentatively scheduled right now for April 4th.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other items? Okay. Recognition of district residents and others.
Jan Reed again. In September, I came to the board and asked about creating a board policy on the nonprofits working on school property, because we do expect our booster clubs to have, we know who's running our booster clubs, how much money they have, and yet we have a nonprofit, we have no idea who's running them, who's behind them, their CFOs, or anything else, or how much money is there. And again, this becomes children's safety. And they are dealing with our children and our parents. So I would like to see a policy come up that we hold them with the same standards that we do with our booster clubs, and that let them be accountable, and who is on their committees and who is part of it.
Okay. Thank you.
So hopefully I didn't fall under that.
Okay. Any other recognition of residents? Okay. We do have a proposed executive session to discuss acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, and collective bargaining negotiations. And after, there'll be no action afterwards. All in favor of going into executive session? Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. We'll see you.